On the program now, we've got Liberal Senator James Paterson. Senator Paterson, thanks for your time. The comments by Scott Morrison yesterday to my colleague David Spears, reassuring Tony Abbott, John Howard and others who are worried about the protections for religious freedom. Obviously, that's part of the No campaign. How do you see that debate unfolding over the coming weeks in what is obviously a difficult issue within the broader Liberal Party?
Morning, Kieran. Yes, well, my view has long been that we should change the law to allow same-sex couples to marry, so I've said that I'll be voting yes in the survey. But I share the concern of many people on the other side of the debate that there could be some flow-on consequences from changing the law and that we must do everything we can to make sure that people's freedom of speech, their freedom of religion and their freedom of conscience is protected. So if there is a successful yes vote, I'll be doing everything I can, like I know Scott Morrison will, to ensure that those freedoms are protected as well as possible, and that the best possible bill is the bill that passes the Parliament.
And how far does that extend? Because obviously, if it's linked to a religious entity, a church or a synagogue, it's linked to that faith, then you can understand there being some freedom. But if it's a normal business or whatever, I mean, the suggestion that someone of a particular faith who owns a business would refuse people service does seem hard to countenance.
Well, Kieran, religious freedom is a universal human right. It's not just a human right for churches and it's not just a human right for priests or rabbis or imams. International human rights law recognises that everyone has a right to religious freedom, and people who aren't religious also have a right to freedom of conscience. So exactly where we draw that line, as you say, is a difficult question. When, for example, the right to freedom of religion clashes with anti-discrimination, we have to make difficult choices about what we put a higher priority on. And I don't know exactly where the Parliament will land on that, but I will be one person who will be arguing very strongly that religious liberty and freedom of conscience and freedom of speech are very important rights that need very robust protections.
But the scenario that everyone talks about, you know, the idea that a baker would refuse an individual a cake for a wedding on the basis that it was a same-sex wedding, is that just a furphy, that scenario?
Well, I think the vast majority of people in the wedding industry businesses will be quite happy with the extra customers, to be honest. And I think most gay couples who want to get married probably wouldn't want to use a baker who doesn't want to bake a cake for their wedding. But of course, there is always exceptions to both of those, and I want to make sure that those exceptions aren't resolved through the courts. I think it's a really sad thing when we see people dragged through the courts because they do have a conscientious objection. So we need to find a mechanism to resolve those disputes in a harmonious way that doesn't limit people's freedoms.
Yeah, because as you well know, people will at either end will be pushing those limits. So let's conclude with the discussion on the renewable energy target. The Treasurer is saying that this needs to remain as legislated under the former Abbott government for certainty for investment. Do you see his point on that?
Oh, absolutely. I see his point, and I don't think there's anyone in the Parliament proposing that we change the RET as it is. But of course, the RET comes to a natural end on its own. And
there are some in your own party saying that.
Well, I mean, I think we can be honest and say that no one thinks the RET is the best policy in the world. I mean, it has been the settled climate policy of the land for a decade, climate and energy policy for the decade, and look at where that's got us. The question is, as the RET itself comes to a natural end, what, if anything, should we replace it with? And that's what the government is carefully considering now, with input from people like Alan Finkel and others.
Senator Paterson, as always, appreciate your time this morning. We'll talk to you soon.